John Merritt hadn't opened real mail in years. Not the kind that comes in thick ivory envelopes with no return address. The kind that smells like dust and something older than time. The kind that arrives on a Tuesday morning without a sound, yet hits the floor like a memory dropped from heaven. He stood in the doorway of his small Vermont cottage, fingers trembling slightly as he turned the envelope over. The paper was rough, the ink faint. There were only two words written in neat, careful script. You promised. John blinked. Once. Twice. His heart beat once, then stopped, then stumbled to catch up with whatever had just echoed through his ribs. He took it inside, sat at the kitchen table with the afternoon light slanting in, touching the edge of the letter like it, too, was afraid of what lay within. The seal broke with a soft sigh. Inside was a photograph, faded, curled at the corners. It showed a girl, 7 or 8 years old, standing in a hallway John hadn't seen in decades. Her hair was dark, chin length. She held something in her hand, a folded paper, almost like a key. And then there was the second item, that same folded paper key, flattened now, preserved between two sheets of cellophane, the creases just the way he remembered. John stared at it. The paper key was his. He made it. For a little girl, 43 years ago. His hands began to tremble, not from age, not from confusion, from recognition. There was no note, no explanation. Just the photograph and the paper key. But beneath it, faint as breath, written in tiny block letters, was a name. Lily. And just below that, almost invisible, you said you'd come find me. The room tilted. John stood up too quickly, the chair scraping against the floor like a warning. He staggered to the sink, splashed water on his face. It didn't help. Nothing would help. Lily. He hadn't spoken that name out loud in 4 decades, but it hadn't left him. Not really. It had lived in the quiet corners of his mind, in the way certain shadows moved, in the hush of autumn wind against the window panes, in the stillness of dreams he never dared finish. He thought she was gone. He knew she was gone. But now, this? John Merritt had been many things. Social worker, youth counselor, volunteer, caretaker. He'd retired quietly, faded even more quietly. People forgot. Institutions changed. Buildings were torn down. He thought maybe the past had finally let him go. But no, the past had a return address after all, and it had found him. He looked again at the photo, the hallway behind Lily, the flickering light, the cracked linoleum, the faint shadow on the wall that shouldn't have been there. And then her face, not smiling, not scared, waiting, just waiting. He picked up the envelope, turned it upside down. A single scrap of paper fluttered out. It was a piece of a newspaper, an obituary, clipped neatly. A man's face, a name he hadn't heard since 1979. Harold Keyes, former administrator of St. Alora's Home for Children, deceased, no surviving family, no services announced. John sat down again hard. St. Alora's, the place where she'd been, where he met her, where everything changed. And now someone, she, had sent him this. After all this time, he stood again, slower this time, went to the hallway closet, dug through old boxes, old coats, a rusted filing cabinet. Behind it, inside a thick manila folder, were the things he had promised never to need again. Photographs, case notes, letters he wasn't allowed to send. And there, nearly at the back, a single sheet of ruled paper, a child's drawing, a house, a door, and beside it, a stick figure labeled John. In blocky, uneven letters, the words, "This key will open any door." He remembered folding it with her, how she had looked at it with such seriousness, like it truly could, like maybe a paper key was all she needed. And maybe, back then, it was. He sat down, picked up the photo again. He was older now, slower, more fragile than he liked to admit. But something had shifted, like a thread had been pulled that could never be pushed back in. Somewhere out there, someone remembered, and they were waiting. John Merritt closed his eyes, held the paper key to his chest, and whispered the name aloud, for the first time in 43 years. Lily! The air didn't move, the room didn't stir, but something inside him unlocked, and a door, long buried, creaked open. It had been spring, or something close to it, the first time John Merritt saw her. The sky outside St. Alora's home for children was still that stubborn, washed-out gray, but the air had a softness to it, the kind of softness that made people believe, foolishly, that things could bloom again. John had only been volunteering at the home for a few weeks then. He wasn't yet the man with the sad eyes and the quiet voice. Not yet the man with too many folders and too few answers. Back then, he still believed every child just needed one person to see them, really see them, and the rest would work itself out. Her name was Lily. She wasn't the first child he met, wasn't even the first to ignore him, but she was the first who made the silence feel loud. She didn't sit with the other kids during story time, didn't laugh during crafts, didn't fight, didn't scream, didn't cry. She just disappeared. Not physically. No, her body was there, perched like a small shadow at the edge of every room. But her mind, her soul, they were somewhere else, somewhere far. The first time John really noticed her, she was in the attic. He hadn't meant to go up there. He was looking for the lost and found box. Some kid had misplaced a coat, and the janitor had mumbled something about, "Check upstairs." The door creaked, the stairs groaned, and there she was, curled against the far wall, knees tucked up to her chest, arms around her legs like she was trying to vanish inside them. A stack of papers sat beside her, covered in pencil marks, drawings, dozens of them. John froze. He didn't want to scare her, but she looked up, eyes too old for her face, dark, wide, and heavy. She didn't speak, didn't move, just watched him like she was deciding whether he was real. "I didn't mean to sneak up," John said softly. Still nothing. He crouched slowly, careful not to come too close. Let the silence breathe. "You like drawing?" he asked. A beat passed, then another. Then, barely a whisper, she nodded. John reached out a hand, not to touch, just to gesture. "May I see?" She slid one across the floor toward him. It was a house, but not like a child would draw. Not boxy or cartoonish. This one had depth, perspective, a second-story window, a small rooftop garden. Ivy climbing the side, a hand-drawn keyhole on the front door. John smiled gently. "It's beautiful." She didn't smile back, but her shoulders eased. Just a little. "Is this somewhere you've been?" She shook her head. "Somewhere you want to go?" A pause. Then a nod. John sat cross-legged now. Let the attic wrap around them like a secret. "What's your name?" A longer pause. "Lily," she said at last. Quiet, but certain. He nodded. "Lily, that's a good name." Another nod, barely perceptible. "I'm John. I come here on Wednesdays and Fridays. I read stories, help with homework, and—" he glanced at the drawing. "I try not to be completely useless at art." She blinked. A hint of amusement flickered across her face. Not a smile, but close. He pointed to the keyhole in her drawing. "So what opens the door?" She reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a scrap of folded notebook paper. With a kind of solemn precision, she unfolded it, revealing a carefully shaped key. Not a real one, just a paper key, cut out by hand. It had ridges. A little circle at the top. It was worn, clearly refolded and unfolded many times. "This does," she said simply. John stared at it. "You made that?" She nodded. He let out a low whistle. "That's incredible." She shrugged, but he could tell. The words meant something. "I used to make those too," he said. "When I was a kid, thought they could open anything." "They can," she whispered. He looked at her, really looked, and saw the tiny world she carried inside her. A place built of paper and pencil, of hope and shadow. And suddenly he felt very, very small in the presence of it. "Can I show you something?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. He reached into his pocket, pulled out an old receipt, took a pen from his jacket, and right there on the attic floor, he folded, carefully, slowly, a paper key. Not as neat as hers, but made with care. He handed it to her. "In case you lose yours," he said. She took it with reverence, held it to her chest, and for the first time she smiled. It was small, brief, but it was real. In that moment, the attic stopped feeling like a place of hiding and started feeling like a beginning. He stood. "I'll see you Friday," he said gently. As he turned to leave, her voice stopped him. "John?" He looked back. She was holding the key, both of them now, hers and his, side by side. "If I leave here someday," he waited. "Will you find me?" John's breath caught. He didn't know why, not yet, but the question felt enormous, like it carried more weight than her small voice could possibly hold. He nodded. "I will." She smiled again, a little braver this time, and as he closed the attic door behind him, John Merritt made a silent vow, one he didn't yet understand, but he would. One day, because some promises don't age. Some live in paper, in pencil, in memory. And some wait in the dark, patient as a girl in an attic with a key made of dreams. Fridays came quietly at St. Alora's, too quietly for a place meant to be filled with children. The laughter was always a bit too forced, the footsteps too stiff, and the eyes of the staff always flickering toward corners they pretended not to see. John Merritt noticed these things. He wasn't the type to speak on them, not yet, but he logged them in the quiet journal of his mind. It had been 3 weeks since he met Lily in the attic. 3 weeks of brief moments, shared sketches, soft words, a growing trust, fragile and quiet. She didn't say much, but when she did, it was precise and powerful. She started showing up during story time, sitting in the back with her knees hugged to her chest. Sometimes she'd nod along with the endings, just barely, like she was listening for truce between the words. He started bringing her art supplies, just small things, better pencils, soft paper. Once, a set of watercolor paints. She'd never asked for them, but she accepted them like gifts from another life, not out of entitlement, but awe. And then, she stopped coming. It was a rainy Friday when he first noticed, the kind of rain that clung to the windows and smeared the sky into one long gray sigh. He scanned the room during story time. No Lily. He checked the art room, the attic, her corner in the garden near the east wall. Nothing. He asked another girl, one of the quieter ones, with eyes that darted like she was always ready to run. "Lily," she repeated. "She's gone." He blinked. "Gone where?" The girl shrugged. "Someone picked her up, a family." John frowned. "When?" "Yesterday." "Did she say goodbye?" The girl hesitated. She didn't know. Didn't know. John left the classroom and headed straight to the administrator's office. The door was closed. He knocked. Once, twice. No answer. He opened it anyway. Harold Keyes looked up from behind his desk, annoyed. Always annoyed. "Mr. Merritt," he said with the thinnest layer of forced politeness. "Something I can help you with." John stayed standing. "Lily. What about her? She's gone?" "Yes, adopted." "By who?" "Confidential." John blinked. "You can't be serious." Mr. Keyes smiled, but it never reached his eyes. "These children are wards of the state. Their placements are handled through proper channels. You, as a volunteer, have no legal grounds for further involvement." John's voice stayed low, but there was something sharp in it now. "She didn't even get to say goodbye." Mr. Keyes folded his hands. "That's unfortunate, but common. Many placements happen quickly, especially with special cases." "Special cases?" "Trauma, behavioral irregularities, attachment issues." John took a slow step forward. "She wasn't a case." "Mr. Merritt," Keyes said, rising now, "you're here 2 days a week. We appreciate your time. But let's not confuse proximity with expertise." John stared at him, and that's when he saw it. The flicker. A flash of something behind Keyes's eyes. Not uncertainty, not guilt. Fear, just for a second. But it was enough. He turned and left. He didn't go home. He searched, called old friends in social work, reached out to foster system contacts, asked careful questions. But Lily was nowhere. No adoption record, no transfer notice, no paper trail. She hadn't been adopted. She had disappeared. The next week, John came back to the home with a clipboard and the pretense of a funding evaluation. He smiled politely, made notes, asked about protocols, but what he really did was watch. The children were quieter now, eyes lower, as if they'd all learned a new rule, one they hadn't been told to say out loud. He asked about records, got denied. He returned the next Friday, and the one after that, until the front desk told him, flatly, that his services were no longer needed. He wasn't allowed back. No explanation. Just done. And that was the end of it, or so the world thought. He kept the drawing, the second key, the memory of her eyes wide in the attic. Not afraid of the dark, but used to it. He tried to move on, to accept what he couldn't change. That's what everyone told him. The system was broken. The past was past. Let it go. But some things won't be let go of. They sit in your chest like a breath you never finish, like a promise half made. He thought of her sometimes when the wind rattled his windows, when he passed a bookstore and saw a child's drawing taped to the glass, when he heard laughter too quiet or too loud. He wondered if she'd forgotten, if she'd grown up somewhere else, if she ever used the paper key. But now there was a letter, a photograph, a key, and the quiet weight of her words still whispering through time. "If I leave here someday, will you find me?" He had said yes, and that promise was waking up. John Merritt didn't sleep that night. The house was still, save for the old clock in the hallway that insisted on reminding him of every second lost. Rain tapped gently against the windows, like someone politely asking to be let in, or maybe to be let out. He sat at his kitchen table with the photo of Lily beside him. Faded, delicate, devastating. The paper key was laid out on a clean napkin like something sacred, and in his hands was a leather-bound journal, worn soft at the edges, its spine long since cracked from years of quiet use. He hadn't opened it in decades, not since he stopped writing her name, but tonight it was open again. And on the first blank page, under the flickering light of a tired kitchen lamp, he wrote 2 words in slow, deliberate strokes. "She's back." And then, "I was right not to forget." By morning, he knew what he had to do and who to call. He dug out his old landline. The contacts were still scribbled on a yellowing notepad near the phone base. He scanned the names. Most of them crossed out. Retired, relocated, gone. But one wasn't. Arthur Lindell, retired journalist, once known for digging into stories no one else would touch. Before the papers got cautious, before the world got tired, John called. The line clicked alive with a voice that sounded like gravel in memory. "Jesus, John," Arthur said after a pause. "You're not dead. Not yet. You calling to catch up or confess? I need your help." A beat. "I figured." They met an hour later at a quiet diner off the highway. Arthur looked older, which was to say he finally looked like how he always sounded. Gray beard, dark coat, a notebook already open on the table. John didn't waste time. He slid the photo and the key across the table. Arthur stared at them, said nothing for a long while. Then, finally, "That's her." John nodded. "Lily. You kept it all these years?" "I promised her." Arthur leaned back, exhaled hard through his nose. "I remember the rumors," he said, "back in '79 about that place. Kids disappearing, placements being moved off books. But no one wanted to hear it. They thought you'd lost it." "I did lose something," John said. "Her." Arthur rubbed his eyes. "You think she sent this?" "I think she's alive, and I think someone doesn't want her to be." Arthur looked at the envelope again. The stamp had been carefully soaked off. No postmark. "This was hand-delivered," John nodded. "It was on my doorstep yesterday morning." Arthur frowned. "Who else knows?" "No one." "Keep it that way." Then Arthur paused, tapped the photograph with one knuckle. "You want this to go anywhere? We need more than memory and a hunch. You need a location, a lead." "I know." Arthur reached into his bag, pulled out a stack of printouts. "I've been tracking something, a string of deaths, all quiet, all with ties to the old social services network. Former case managers, foster liaisons, 2 retired psychologists, all within the last 5 years." John leaned in. "You think it's a cleanup?" "I think it's a pattern." He handed John a sheet, an obituary, plain, short, sterile. Margaret Tollin, former administrator, deceased, no funeral, body cremated. No next of kin. "She worked at St. Alora's in 1978, Arthur said. She vanished for 6 months, came back looking different, never said where she went, retired early." John stared at the date. 2 weeks before Lily disappeared. "Exactly." Arthur then handed him a second paper. "And this one might be your first real breadcrumb." It was a document, partially redacted, a hospital ledger, a list of patient intake numbers, no names, just codes, dates, and locations. But one column was marked transferred outside network, and one line, highlighted faintly, had a handwritten note in the margin. "Jane Doe, same symptoms as H43, under sedation, transferred." John swallowed. "Where to?" Arthur looked over his shoulder, then slid a sticky note across the table. "A name, a location, Hollow Hill Institute, Greystone County." "Never heard of it," John murmured. "You wouldn't have. It's private. No website, no public intake. Serves as a long-term psychiatric care facility. Officially. And unofficially?" Arthur's voice dropped. "People go there when someone wants them. Unremembered." John clenched his jaw. "That's where we start." Arthur hesitated. "You can't go in alone. Not anymore." "I wasn't planning to." And he wasn't. Because an hour later, in a small parking lot behind the diner, a rusted sedan pulled up beside them. Out stepped a young woman, mid-20s, sharp eyes, practical boots. Arthur introduced her with a glance. "My granddaughter, Samantha Lindell." She offered her hand. "Call me Sam." John took it. "You know what this is? I know the system doesn't erase people on accident, and I know if this girl's alive, Someone's hiding her. Arthur gave a small smile. She's better with tech than either of us ever were. Already pulled property records on Hollow Hill. Found something strange. Sam pulled out her tablet, tapped it. The Institute's land is owned by a company called Meridian Vest. They're a defense contractor. A mental hospital owned by weapons manufacturers? John said, eyebrows raised. Technically by one of their subsidiaries, Sam corrected. But yes. John looked at Arthur. How deep is this going? Arthur didn't blink. I don't know yet. John looked down at the paper key, folded, fragile. Waiting. She sent this, he whispered again. I know she did. Then she's telling you where to go, Sam said. John nodded, and quietly, somewhere deep in his bones, the old vow, the one made in an attic, surrounded by sketches and ghosts, stirred awake again. If she's alive, I will find her. And this time he meant now. The road to Hollow Hill twisted like a bad memory. Sam drove. Her hands were steady on the wheel, her jaw set like someone who'd stopped hoping for easy answers. John sat beside her, gripping the worn strap of his satchel, staring out at the fog-choked woods that pressed in on either side of the narrow highway. They'd been driving for hours, following the trail that Arthur had helped chart. Not a straight line, not even close. Hollow Hill wasn't on most GPS apps. It wasn't on the road signs. It didn't even have a real address, just a rural route number and a warning from a local that, you'll know it when the trees go too quiet. They did. It happened all at once. 1 minute, bird song, insects, the low hum of wind through the trees, and the next, silence. Sam's grip on the wheel tightened. There, she said, pointing with her chin. A rusted iron gate loomed ahead, half covered by vines. Behind it, a long gravel path disappeared into dense fog. A faded sign hung crookedly to one side. The letters were almost gone, but you could still just barely read them. Hollow Hill Institute, Shorn 1952. For rest, for recovery, for relief. John's stomach turned. Relief, he muttered. That's what they called it when they took kids away. Sam put the car in park. You ready? John didn't answer. He just opened the door. They walked. No one greeted them. The air was damp, thick with rot and something else. Something sterile. The kind of smell you find in forgotten basements and hospital wings long since emptied. The building appeared slowly, as if reluctant to be seen. Gray stone, small, narrow windows, ivy crawling like veins up the sides. It looked more like an asylum from an old horror film than a place for healing, but healing had never really been the goal, had it? At the front doors, Sam tapped a hidden camera clipped to her jacket. Audio and video rolling, she whispered. John nodded, pulled his coat tighter around him. They pushed open the doors. The lobby was cold. White tile floors, reception desk unmanned. A few chairs lined the wall, all mismatched, all too clean. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, the only sound. Then came footsteps. A woman appeared from a side hallway, late 40s, pale smile, hair pulled too tight. Welcome to Hollow Hill, she said. Do you have an appointment? We're hoping to speak to someone about a patient, John said. Her smile didn't flicker. Names? We're not sure, Sam replied smoothly. We believe she may have been transferred here under the name Jane Doe. The woman's eyes didn't change, but the muscles in her neck tensed just enough. I'm afraid we can't share patient information. I understand, John said, but this isn't about data. It's about someone who may not have come here by choice. The woman's voice stayed level. All our patients are here under proper guardianship. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Sam didn't move. Could we use the restroom before we go? The woman blinked, just for a second. Third door down the left hall. Sam smiled. Thanks. They didn't go to the restroom. Not really, they went past it, down the hall, and when they were sure they were alone, Sam picked the lock on the door marked Records, Private. Inside was dim, smelled of dust and bleach. Filing cabinets lined the walls. Old computers hummed faintly in one corner. John moved instinctively, opened drawer after drawer. Dates, codes. Intake forms with no names, just patient numbers. Then, finally, a folder. Patient 1103A. Attached was a black and white photo. A teenage girl, thin, shoulders slumped, hair cropped short, eyes dead. John stared at it. "I think this is her," he whispered. "It's Lily, but older." Sam was already pulling out her phone, taking pictures. They kept searching. And then, in a bottom drawer, something else. A photograph color this time. Newer. A room. Small. Bare. A cot in the center. On the wall behind the cot, scratched into the paint, a word. John. He froze. His name. Carved by hand. Jagged. Desperate. "She was here," he whispered. Sam touched his arm. "We need to go. Now." They turned to leave, but the hallway outside wasn't empty anymore. Two men, suits, earpieces, broad shoulders, no uniforms, but not regular staff. Sam stepped forward. "We got turned around." "No visitors past the lobby," one of the men said. The other moved his hand toward his hip. "We're leaving," John said quickly. The men didn't speak again, but they followed them all the way back to the car. Only once the engine roared to life did the spell break. Sam's hands shook as she gripped the wheel. "That was security," she said. "Private. Military trained. I'd bet anything." John didn't answer. He was holding the photo, the one with the word John. She remembered. After all this time, she remembered his name. Somewhere not long ago, Lily had carved it into a wall, which meant she was still alive, still waiting, still trying to be found. John exhaled. "Let's go," he said. Sam looked at him. "Where?" He looked down at the paper key in his pocket, now creased, now trembling with meaning. "Wherever this opens next." They drove in silence for a long while, letting the road unwind behind them like ribbon pulled loose from memory. Sam gripped the wheel with white knuckles, her jaw tight, her eyes scanning the mirror more often than necessary. She didn't speak, didn't need to. The men in suits, the sterile halls, the word John carved in desperation, it all sat between them, heavy and loud. John Merritt sat in the passenger seat, holding the folder in his lap like it was made of glass. The photo, Lily, pale and withdrawn, her eyes searching someplace just out of frame, was tucked inside. She couldn't have been more than 16 in the picture, but it was her, older, and still caged, still alone. "She knew," he murmured. "She knew I'd come." Sam glanced sideways. "She didn't just remember you. She trusted you enough to call for help. Years later, after God knows what." John didn't answer, just closed his eyes and pressed the heels of his hands to them. He could feel something rising inside. Not quite grief, not yet rage. A kind of pressure, like something inside him had cracked, and light was starting to pour through. They stopped at a motel an hour south of Greystone County, one of those places where the neon buzzed louder than the traffic, and every room smelled faintly of old soap and new regret. Sam set up her laptop at the small table near the window. John paced. "There's something we're missing," he said. "A link. A line between her being taken and her still being there." Sam didn't look up. "I pulled audio files off the old server copy we grabbed at the clinic." John froze. "They let you do that?" "No," she said, finally looking at him. "That's why I did it quietly." She clicked on a folder labeled Archive, Hollow Hill, Unfiled. Inside were dozens of short audio files, unlabeled, no dates, no metadata, just fragments. She played the first, Static, then footsteps, a door creaking, silence. Next, a man's voice. She's nonverbal again. We've increased dosage. Next, another voice, female, shaky. She kept asking for someone. John said he was coming. John's breath caught. Sam clicked again. And then, a child's voice. Soft, thin, the kind of voice that feels like it shouldn't exist on tape, like it's too fragile for the world. Is this on? The girl said. They said I could talk, but only if I stay calm. A pause. I don't know what day it is. The windows don't show the real sky anymore. I know that. I used to count the birds. Another pause. A breath. If this ever gets out, if anyone hears me, tell John I didn't forget. Tell him I kept the key. It's with me. It's safe. I know it was just paper, but I believed in it. I still do. John gripped the edge of the table. Hard. Her voice was older now, but it was her. Beneath the fear, beneath the sedation, it was still Lily. I saw things, she whispered. Other girls. Some left and never came back. Some stopped talking. I draw sometimes. When they let me. The ink they give us smells like metal. The recording crackled, then went silent for several seconds. Then, they told me I'm not real, that no one remembers, that John forgot. But I remember him. I remember the attic. I remember the drawing, the house with the garden, the paper key. A choke sound escaped John's throat. He turned away. The final words came in a whisper, trembling and raw. Tell him I'm still here. The recording stopped. Sam said nothing. John stood, walked to the window, pulled the curtain back, stared into the parking lot like it might offer answers. It didn't. He whispered, more to himself than to her. She believed I would come. Sam closed the laptop. She gave us everything, she said. That's more than most prisoners ever get to do. John turned to her. That's what she is, isn't she? A prisoner. Sam nodded. John sat slowly on the edge of the bed, both hands on his knees. I should have tried harder, he said. Back then, I should have made noise, raised hell. She doesn't need your guilt, Sam said gently. She needs your fire. He looked at her. Something in his eyes had shifted, hardened, lit from within. I'm not stopping now, he said. They've hidden her for years, but she's still sending signals. She's trying to lead you, Sam said. She gave you the key. She carved your name. She spoke through that recorder. John nodded. We follow. There was a beat of silence, and then Sam pulled up another folder. One more thing, she said. There's a location tag buried in the file metadata. You wouldn't see it unless you scrubbed the hex data, which I did. She turned the screen to face him. A map, one blinking point. Coordinates. Not Hollow Hill, not the clinic. Something else. A shipping address tied to a now-defunct logistics company, just outside a coastal town 2 states away. John leaned in. What's there? Sam's voice was quiet. I don't know, but it's where the audio was last accessed. 3 months ago. John stood up, already reaching for his coat. I'm going. Sam didn't hesitate. So am I. The voice still echoed in the room, soft, broken, brave. Tell him I'm still here. He was listening now. He was coming. The wind had teeth that night, sharp, wet, and cold, snapping through the trees as John Merritt and Sam crept through the overgrown path behind the derelict freight warehouse. The moon was a thin smear behind clouds, casting just enough light to make shadows dangerous. The coordinates had led them here, a forgotten shipping hub on the outskirts of Fenwick Harbor, rusting and half swallowed by vines. Nature was reclaiming it, but someone had been keeping parts of it alive. A fresh lock on the side gate, boot prints in the mud, faint light, far too faint to be from a street lamp, flickering behind thick, salt-crusted glass. John crouched near a utility box, half buried in moss. "This place doesn't breathe right," he whispered. Sam scanned the surroundings, one hand on her compact flashlight. The files led here. The recorder metadata, the clinic tag. Someone accessed Lily's archive from this network. John's voice was lower now, nearly a growl. "Then maybe she's inside." Sam nodded once. They didn't speak again. Inside the warehouse, the smell hit first. Mildew, sea rot, something chemical. The air felt dense, still, as if sound itself refused to move too quickly. Their footsteps echoed faintly over the cracked concrete floor. Empty pallets leaned like gravestones against the walls. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, most of them dead, some flickering like ghosts trying to wake up. John found the first clue near the loading bay. A child's drawing, half buried under debris. It was faded, damp, but still legible. A crooked tree, a square house, a girl holding something, a key. He reached for it slowly, brushing off dirt, heart pounding. "She's been here," Sam nodded, glancing around. "But why lead us here? If she's trapped at the clinic or somewhere worse, why this place?" John shook his head. Maybe this is where they moved them. Or maybe this was her hiding place. Once. Then a noise. Not loud, but distinct. Metal. Sliding. Somewhere deep in the back of the warehouse. Sam moved first, flashlight raised. John followed. They passed rows of broken machinery, crates marked in Cyrillic, and a rusted freight scale still blinking a red zero. The air grew colder. Then they found it, a door partially hidden behind a tall partition of stacked crates. It wasn't marked, no handle, just a seam in the wall and a keypad, barely lit. John stared. "That's not in any floor plan." Sam knelt beside it, tracing the edges. "Look, there, on the corner of the keypad. Etched in the dust, a symbol, 3 dots in a triangle." John's chest tightened. "That's the same as the carving in the attic." Sam typed in the numbers from Lily's drawing. "It might be nothing but—" The keypad clicked, a hiss of hydraulics. The door opened. Darkness, but not silence. Far below, a hum, alive, mechanical. They descended metal stairs slick with condensation, walls narrowing, closing in. The corridor stretched into black. Then another door. No lock, just pressure. John pushed it open. What lay beyond didn't look like a warehouse. It looked like a lab. White walls, steel tables, shelves of labeled vials and sealed folders. A generator humming low behind glass. Sam exhaled. This wasn't meant to be found. John moved to the desk. "Look." Photos, dozens. Girls, boys, ages written in marker. Red lines crossing some names. Others circled. At the bottom, Lily Merritt. 3 images, all from different years. One had a handwritten note beside it. "Subject retained. Memory stabilization protocol failed. Transfer recommended." John's throat closed, but Sam wasn't looking at the desk anymore. She was staring at the wall. More drawings. Taped, tattered, some only half finished. All in the same hand. The same odd proportions. The same crooked trees. The same girl with a key. And below one of them, a new word scrawled in red ink. "Down," Sam whispered. "There's more." Behind a tall file cabinet, another door. This one older. Wooden even. Cracked at the edges like it had been slammed shut 1,000 times. They opened it. Stairs again. This time, downward. The air grew colder still, metallic with moisture, thick with secrets. The staircase ended in what could only be described as a bunker. A single long hall, flickering lights above, and doors. Doors lined on either side like hospital rooms. Most were sealed. One was slightly open. John reached for it, pushed gently. Inside was a small cot, a desk, a recording device, and on the bed, nothing but a sketch pad. He opened it slowly, page after page after page of the same thing. The attic, the paper key, the girl watching the world from above, and on the final page, a message, written not in pencil, but ink. They told me no one would ever open this door, but I knew you would. I knew you'd find the quiet places, the hidden ones. I knew the key would still fit. I knew you remembered. I remembered too. Sam was silent. John lowered the pad. His voice was hoarse. She left this for me. No, Sam said quietly. She left it for us. They stood there in the quiet heart of something unspeakable. Beneath them, footsteps, echoing faintly, coming closer. The night had wrapped the town in its heavy cloak, a thick, suffocating blanket of darkness, pierced only by the distant glow of street lamps, flickering like tired eyes. John Merritt sat by the window of his modest rented room, the faded curtains fluttering softly with the breeze, and stared out into the void beyond. The world was quiet, too quiet. His thoughts drifted back to the hidden doors beneath the warehouse. The paper key, the sketch pad, the message. I knew you'd find the quiet places. The words replayed in his mind like a whispered secret, a fragile thread connecting past to present, hope to fear. He didn't notice the slow creak of the front door opening. Not at first. It was a sound too subtle, too careful, as if whoever entered wanted to be nothing more than a shadow slipping through a dream. Then a soft knock at the window. John's heart jumped. He rose, every nerve awake and alert. The knock came again. 3 slow taps. Deliberate, urgent. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and pulled back the curtain. Outside, a figure stood, cloaked in darkness. The rain had begun again, light drops sparkling in the faint streetlight. The figure lifted a gloved hand, holding something small and wrapped in cloth. John hesitated. The air was thick with questions, with danger, with the unknown. "Who's there?" he whispered into the night. No answer, but the figure shifted, revealing, just for a moment, the face of a young woman, eyes wide, wet from rain or tears. He couldn't tell. Her gaze locked onto his, filled with a silent plea, a fragile hope. Before he could say a word, the figure dropped the package onto the ledge and vanished into the mist. John's fingers trembled as he reached out, unwrapped the bundle. Inside lay a battered voice recorder, one he recognized immediately. The same model from the clinic archives, the same that had captured Lily's whispered messages. He pressed the play button. Static. Then her voice clear and trembling. "John, if you're hearing this, it means I'm still here, but they're coming. They're closer now, and they know. I can't stay. Not much longer. I need you to find me before it's too late." The recorder clicked off. John's breath hitched. He looked out the window again. The street was empty, but the feeling remained, the weight of being watched. Behind him, a shadow moved. John spun around. Standing in the doorway was a young woman. "Lily?" he asked, voice barely audible. She nodded, rain dripping from her soaked hair. "I'm here," she whispered. And for the first time in years, hope flickered like a fragile flame in the dark. The rain had stopped, leaving the street slick and shimmering under the pale glow of the streetlights. Inside the rented house on the outskirts of town, silence hung thick, broken only by the soft crackling of the fireplace. Lily sat curled on the worn couch, her eyes distant, haunted by memories too heavy for words. John Merritt watched her quietly, the weight of years pressing down on both of them. Outside, the night breathed slow and deep, but beneath the house, hidden from the world, something waited, something old. John held the paper key tightly in his palm, feeling the creases bite into his skin. It was more than a piece of folded paper now. It was a promise, a beacon, a lifeline. "We need to find the room," he said softly, "the place where they kept you." Lily looked up, her eyes shimmering with tears that caught the firelight. "The underground room," she whispered. "I remember. It's where they tried to break me." John nodded. "Then we go. Tonight." They slipped quietly into the shadows of the basement, stairs groaning under their weight. The air grew colder, heavier, like the breath of secrets long buried. The faint hum of an old generator vibrated through the walls, mixing with the distant drip of water. John pulled out a flashlight, its beam slicing through the darkness. They moved carefully, every step echoing in the hollow space. The walls closed in around them, rough stone and cold concrete, unyielding and unwelcoming. After what felt like hours, they reached a steel door, old but sturdy, locked tight with a rusted padlock. John produced a small, weathered key from his pocket, the one that had been taped to the journal pages so long ago. "The paper key," he smiled weakly. "It's time." With trembling hands, he lifted the padlock and heard the satisfying click of release. The door swung open, revealing a narrow corridor descending further underground. The air grew damp, thick with the scent of mold and metal. A faint glow flickered at the end, a single bare bulb swinging gently. Lily's breath caught. "They kept me here. For days, weeks, months." John reached out, taking her hand. "You're safe now." They moved forward, the corridor opening into a small chamber, a room no bigger than a closet. The walls were scratched and scarred with desperate marks. Names, dates, even symbols. Some too faint to read, others chillingly clear. On the floor lay a battered cot, stained and torn. Nearby, a metal tray held rusty instruments, remnants of cold procedures that never healed. John's voice cracked. "This was your prison." Lily knelt by the cot, fingers tracing the gouges in the wood. "They tried to erase me here, tried to make me silent." She pulled out a folded piece of paper from her pocket, another drawing. This one showed the underground room, the swinging bulb, the cot. John looked up, eyes wide. "You remembered everything," she nodded slowly. "Because someone promised to come back." Suddenly, a distant noise shattered the silence. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, approaching. John and Lily froze. The shadows around the door deepened. The past was catching up, and the underground room held one final secret, one they were not prepared to face. The paper key was folded and refolded, worn soft at the edges. A fragile relic of a promise made long ago in an attic filled with shadows and whispered secrets. John Merritt held it carefully between thumb and forefinger, feeling its creases, its weight, its silent meaning. It was more than just paper, more than a shape cut with scissors. It was a map, a cipher, a lifeline to something lost and waiting. Lily sat beside him, quiet, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the lamp in the cramped room. The rain had started again outside, tapping steadily on the window pane like a secret drumbeat, calling, waiting. "She made this for me," Lily whispered, voice barely more than a breath. "To remind me, to remind you, that no matter how dark it gets, there's a door to open, a way back." John nodded slowly, tracing the jagged edges of the key with his fingertip. It wasn't just a key, it was hope. They had spent weeks chasing shadows, following faint traces, unraveling lies wrapped in silence. The paper key had led them from the attic, to the clinic, to the warehouse. And now, it whispered of one last place. The place where the past and future collided. The next morning, the air was thick with fog, the kind that clings to your skin and seeps into your bones. John and Sam loaded their gear into the car, the paper key folded carefully inside John's jacket pocket, pressed close to his heart. The drive was long, the roads winding through forgotten back roads, past shuttered farms and empty fields. The world seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for the final act. They stopped at a small town, a place marked on no map but whispered about in hushed tones. A town with one gas station, one diner, and a rumor of a building that no one spoke of openly. John and Sam stepped out into the damp morning. The air was thick with the smell of earth and rain, of secrets waiting to be uncovered. "Are you ready?" Sam asked, voice low. John swallowed, nodded. Together, they approached the faded sign that marked the entrance to the old mill. It was a building swallowed by time, walls streaked with rust, windows cracked and clouded with grime. The mill had long since stopped turning, but inside and something still moved. They slipped inside. The floorboards creaked beneath their feet. The smell of dust and oil wrapped around them like a shroud. The air was cool, still, as if holding its breath. John reached into his pocket, pulled out the paper key. He unfolded it slowly, letting the creases open like pages in a book. He held it against a small panel near the base of the wall, a patch of wood that looked out of place, worn smooth, almost like a hidden door. Sam shone her flashlight, illuminating a faint outline. A seam in the wood, a lock, old but functional. John's fingers trembled as he traced the edges of the key against the lock. It fit. A quiet click echoed in the stillness. The panel swung open. Beyond it, a narrow staircase descended into darkness, thick with a scent of earth and secrets. John took a deep breath, stepped forward. Sam followed. The stairs creaked, groaned under their weight, the darkness swallowing them whole. At the bottom, they found a small chamber, walls lined with old files, photographs, notebooks, artifacts of a forgotten war. John ran his hands over a dusty table, pulling out a worn leather journal, the same one he had once carried years ago. Inside, pages were filled with scribbles, drawings, desperate attempts to remember, to communicate. And there, taped to the inside cover, was another paper key, smaller, folded tight, waiting. Lily reached out, took it gently. "This is where it all began," she whispered. John nodded, eyes heavy. The paper key, a symbol of persistence, of courage, of a light that refuses to be extinguished. Outside, and the rain had stopped. But inside, the storm was just beginning. They were closer now, closer to the truth, and closer to the door that could finally set them free. The room was heavy with silence, thick and waiting, as if the walls themselves held their breath. John Merritt sat across from Lily, the worn leather journal resting between them like a fragile bridge to the past. Outside, the rain tapped gently against the window, soft, relentless, like a heartbeat in the dark. Lily's fingers traced the faded ink on a page, her eyes distant, searching. It's like the memories are just out of reach, like something's holding them back. John nodded slowly, understanding the weight of what she meant. The years in that underground room, the sedation, the fear. It wasn't just time that had stolen her past. It was something more insidious, something cruel. "We have to find a way to bring it back," he said softly, "to wake the parts that were buried." She looked up, meeting his gaze. "But how? Every time I try, it's like there's a wall, a darkness." John swallowed. "Sometimes, as the hardest memories come with the biggest truths." Sam stepped into the room carrying a small box. She set it on the table with a soft thud. I found this in the clinic records, a collection of old audio files, recordings from when Lily first arrived. John's eyes flickered with hope. Maybe this is the key. Together they opened the box, revealing a tangled mass of tapes and a battered voice recorder. Sam loaded one tape and pressed play. Static. Then a faint, trembling voice. Day 23, patient 17, nonverbal, repeated references to John, disoriented but responsive to familiar stimuli. The voice was clinical, cold, but beneath it a whisper, a flutter of recognition. John's heart pounded as another tape played, a child's voice, fragile, scared. I remember the attic, the paper key, the garden. The words were faint, but real. Lily's hand shook as she reached out to touch the recorder. "It's me," she whispered. John leaned closer. "You're not alone anymore." Over the next days they worked together, playing the tapes, piecing together fragments of forgotten moments, moments of hope, fear, bravery. One evening, as the rain pattered softly outside, Lily sat by the fire with the journal open on her lap. She began to write, words spilling onto the page like a river breaking through a dam. "I remember the attic," she wrote slowly, carefully. "The paper key, the promise, the light in the dark." John watched her, a mixture of awe and sorrow in his eyes. The memories were rekindling, fragile flames flickering to life, but with them came shadows, images of cold rooms, harsh voices, the weight of silence. Lily's voice broke as she spoke. "They wanted me to forget, but I didn't. I couldn't." John reached across the table, taking her hand. "You're stronger than they ever imagined." And in that moment, the past began to shift. The walls around her mind crumbled, and the truth she had buried for so long started to rise. Outside, the rain slowed, the night softened. Inside, a new chapter was beginning. Memory rekindled, and with it, the fight for freedom. The air was thick with anticipation, a tension so palpable it wrapped around John Merritt and Lily like a shroud. The rain had ceased, but the sky remained heavy, gray and bruised, casting a muted light through the dusty windows of the small room they had claimed as a sanctuary. Outside, the world carried on, oblivious to the storm brewing within. John sat behind the battered desk, fingers tapping nervously against the worn wood. The papers before him were a tapestry of secrets, photographs, scanned documents, and fragments of evidence painstakingly collected over weeks. Each piece told a story of silence, suppression, and pain, a story that was about to be told aloud. Lily stood by the window, staring out as if searching for something just beyond the horizon. A glimpse of freedom, perhaps, or a sliver of hope. Her hands trembled, clutching the journal that had become her anchor. "We have to be careful," John said, breaking the silence. His voice was low, measured, but laced with urgency. "Once this goes public, there's no turning back." Sam, who had been quietly organizing the files, looked up. "The contacts are ready, journalists, human rights groups. They want the full story." John nodded. "They deserve the truth, and the world needs to see it." The room fell silent again, save for the faint scratching of a pen as Lily signed her name at the bottom of her prepared statement. Her signature was steady, resolute, a declaration of courage. A sudden knock at the door jolted them. John exchanged a glance with Sam before rising to answer. Outside stood Arthur Lindell, his weathered face set with determination. "It's time," he said simply. Together they assembled around the small table. The digital recorder sat between them, ready to capture the testimony that would shatter years of silence. Lily took a deep breath, her voice barely above a whisper as she began. I was taken, hidden away, made invisible, but I remember the faces, the places, the names they wanted forgotten. Her words hung in the air like a storm breaking, heavy and undeniable. John added his voice, recounting the trail of deception, the attempts to erase her existence, the silence that had bound them all. As they spoke, the weight of years lifted, replaced by a fierce determination to expose the truth. Later, the statement was released. The story exploded across headlines, social media feeds, whispered conversations in cafes and homes. Images of the paper key, sketches from the attic, fragments of Lily's journal became symbols of a fight that refused to be buried. Reactions were swift and varied. Some called for justice, others for denial and dismissal. But the tide was turning. At the center of it all, Lily found strength in her voice, in the faces of those who stood beside her. John watched as the world began to listen, and he knew the path ahead would be dangerous, uncertain. But for the first time, they had a chance to break the silence, to bring light to the hidden doors, and to reclaim what was lost. The exposure was just the beginning, and the fight was far from over. The fog hung low over the coastline that morning, thick and suffocating, swallowing the horizon whole. John Merritt stood at the edge of the cliff, eyes fixed on the endless gray sea below. The waves crashed rhythmically, a steady pulse against the jagged rocks, relentless and unforgiving. He folded his arms tightly across his chest, the chill in the air sinking deep into his bones. Somewhere out there, beyond the mist, was the vanishing point, the place where truth and illusion blurred, where answers dissolved like salt in water. Behind him, the house was silent, save for the soft breathing of Lily, resting inside after days of restless struggle. The journey had brought them here, to this moment, precarious and fragile. John's thoughts drifted back to the last clue, a faded map marked with cryptic symbols, coordinates that led to nowhere and everywhere at once, a place whispered about in hushed tones, a shadow on the edge of memory. He remembered the way Lily's eyes had flickered when she spoke of it, a mixture of fear and hope. The vanishing point, she had said, where everything disappears, including me. The rain began again, light at first, then heavier, soaking the earth, washing away footprints and memories alike. John pulled his coat tighter and began the descent toward the abandoned dock. Each step echoed with uncertainty. The boards creaked underfoot, and the salty air stung his lungs. At the pier's end, a solitary boat rocked gently, tethered but ready, waiting like a ghost. He hesitated, the weight of the unknown pressing down, then climbed aboard. The engine sputtered to life with a reluctant cough, and they slipped away from shore, into the mist. As the boat cut through the gray waves, John scanned the horizon, searching for a sign, a flicker, a promise. Hours passed, the world shrank to the boat and the sea, until a shape emerged from the fog. A small island, barren and bleak, crowned by twisted trees and crumbling ruins. John felt the pull of something ancient, something lost but not forgotten. They docked and stepped onto the cold, rocky shore. Lily's voice was barely audible. "This is where they brought me, the place they wanted erased." The ruins were silent witnesses, walls etched with strange symbols, floors littered with broken glass and forgotten belongings. John picked up a shattered locket, its chain tangled and worn. A sudden noise broke the stillness, footsteps approaching from the shadows. They turned to see a figure emerge, a woman, face lined with years and sorrow. "I've been waiting for you," she said, voice trembling. John recognized her, a former caregiver. someone who had slipped through the cracks of time and memory. She handed him a folded letter. It's everything you need to know, but be careful. The vanishing point doesn't forget, and it doesn't forgive. As they read the letter under the fading light, a chill ran down John's spine. The vanishing point was not just a place, it was a reckoning, a threshold between what was lost and what could be found. And crossing it meant facing the shadows lurking in the depths before they swallowed them whole. The house stood at the end of a forgotten lane, a shadow among shadows, silent and still, as if time itself dared not disturb it. John Merritt pulled the collar of his coat higher against the cold night air, the fog curling around his feet like whispered warnings. Lily walked beside him, clutching the worn journal close, her steps tentative yet determined. The air was thick with memories, unspoken truths lingering like ghosts in every corner of this forsaken place. They reached the wrought iron gate, its ironwork twisted and tangled like the secrets held within. The lock was old, but John's fingers found the paper key in his pocket, its edges soft from years of folding and unfolding. He pressed it against the rusted lock, and with a whispering click, the gate creaked open, swinging inward to reveal a path swallowed by overgrown ivy and shadows. The house itself was a hulking relic, walls draped in peeling paint, windows shuttered like closed eyes, doors that hadn't welcomed light or laughter in decades. They stepped inside. The floorboards groaned beneath their feet, a mournful song of neglect and loss. The air was thick with dust, the scent of old wood and forgotten stories. Lily's fingers brushed the wallpaper, faded and cracked, as if trying to grasp the echoes trapped beneath its surface. Silence, she murmured. This house was made for it. John's gaze swept the empty rooms, the fireplace cold and dark, the stairwell leading upward into shadows deeper than night. In the parlor, a lone photograph hung askew on the wall, a faded image of a smiling girl, her eyes bright despite the years of darkness that followed. Lily stepped forward, reaching out to touch the frame. "That's me," she whispered. "Before they took everything." John nodded, swallowing a lump. "And now, we're here to bring it back." Their footsteps led them upstairs, each creak a reminder of the weight carried by these walls. At the end of the hallway, a door stood closed, marked only by scratches worn into the wood. John reached out, hands steady despite the tremor inside. He pushed the door open. Inside was a room untouched by time, a small bed, a desk covered in scribbled notes, a window looking out onto a sky heavy with stars. On the desk lay a single object, a music box, its surface dulled, but still intricate. Lily wound the key. A soft melody filled the room, fragile, haunting, a lullaby lost to years. Tears spilled down her cheeks as memories flooded back, faces, voices, moments stolen but never forgotten. John took her hand. "We'll fill this house with sound again," he promised, "because even in the deepest silence, hope can find a voice, and they would be the ones to make it heard." The dawn was hesitant, slow to push back the shadows that clung stubbornly to the edges of the world. Light filtered through the cracked blinds, casting pale stripes across the worn wooden floorboards. John Merritt stood by the window, hands resting lightly on the sill, watching as the first glimmers of day stretched like fragile fingers into the room. Around him the quiet was thick, pregnant with expectation, a fragile calm before the storm. Lily sat across from him, her eyes tracing the pale sunlight that danced on the pages of her journal. The night had been restless, dreams stirring long-buried memories, whispers from the past refusing to be silenced. Today was the day they would step out from the shadows. Together. John's voice broke the silence. "We can't hide anymore. Not when the truth is ready." Lily nodded, folding the journal carefully. It's time for the world to see. Sam entered, carrying a folder thick with documents, evidence meticulously gathered from every corner, every whisper, every hidden door they had unlocked. She laid it on the table with a quiet certainty. "Press is ready," she said. "They want the full story, the paper key, the underground rooms, the voices they tried to bury." John ran a hand through his hair. "They'll try to silence us, but the light, it's stronger." Outside, the city was waking. Sirens, distant conversations, the rustle of life beginning anew. The team gathered in the small conference room, a circle of resolve. The recorder was set, ready to capture every word, every confession, every truth too long buried. Lily took a deep breath, her voice steady but soft as she began. "I was taken from a life I barely knew, hidden in places no one dared look. But I remembered. I held on." Her story spilled forth, raw and unfiltered, punctuated by the tremor of pain and the strength of survival. John followed, detailing the web of lies, the cover-ups, the faces behind the silence. Sam presented the evidence, the documents that traced money, shipments, unmarked vans. Together they painted a picture impossible to ignore. The hours passed like a heartbeat, each revelation a spark igniting a fire in the hearts of those who listened. Outside the room, cameras waited, reporters poised, the world ready to receive the story. When the press conference began, Lily stepped to the podium, the paper key hanging from a chain around her neck. She held it up. "This key, this symbol of hope, reminds us that even in the darkest places, light can reach." Her words echoed beyond the room, through streets, homes, screens. The silence that followed was not emptiness. It was awakening. Messages poured in, calls for justice, solidarity. But shadows stirred. The powerful didn't fade quietly. Threats came, warnings whispered in the dark. Yet amidst it all, the truth stood firm. John watched Lily from the sidelines, her face illuminated by the glare of flashing cameras, her spirit unbroken. They had stepped into the light, and nothing, not fear, not silence, could dim the flame they had ignited. Because truth, once revealed, has a way of changing everything. And this was only the beginning. The morning light crept slowly through the tattered curtains, casting long shadows across the room. Shadows that seemed to stretch back through years of silence and loss. John Merritt sat alone at the edge of the bed, his fingers wrapped tightly around the worn paper key. It felt heavy in his palm, not just with the weight of paper, but with the weight of promises, memories, and unfinished battles. Outside, the world moved on as if nothing had changed. The distant hum of traffic, birds awakening in the trees, the gentle rustle of wind through broken window panes. But inside, time seemed suspended, hanging in the balance between what was and what could be. John's thoughts wandered to Lily, to her whispered words in the dark, the strength she'd summoned from depths he never imagined. She was no longer the frightened girl hiding behind shadows. She was a beacon, a voice carrying far beyond these walls. He stood slowly, walking to the window, gazing out at the endless horizon where sky met earth in a pale, misted line. What do we leave behind when the night fades, when the silence breaks, when the world finally listens? Memory, stories, scars etched deep but shared openly. John turned, crossing the room to the small desk where a stack of notebooks lay. Journals filled with truths, drawings, fragments of a life reclaimed piece by piece. He picked one up, fingers tracing the faded handwriting, the sketches of keys and doors, the maps to freedom hidden in plain sight. A knock echoed softly from the door. Lily stepped inside, her eyes bright but tired. She carried a bundle wrapped in cloth, a collection of mementos gathered from the journey they'd traveled together. She smiled faintly, setting the bundle on the desk. "We can't carry it all," she said softly, "but we carry enough." John nodded, feeling the weight of those words settle around them. They sat together, unfolding memories like fragile wings. Photos worn thin, letters never sent, promises whispered in the dark. Outside, the sky shifted from gray to gold. A new day breaking. They talked quietly about what lay ahead. The battles yet to fight, the voices yet to raise, the light they hoped to kindle in others. John looked at Lily, the paper key still resting between them. "We're leaving more than stories behind," he said. "We're leaving hope, a path for those who come after." She reached out, clasping his hand. "For them," she whispered, "for everyone who's been forgotten." The room seemed to breathe with him, a fragile sanctuary amid the chaos. And as the sun rose higher, casting warmth through broken glass, they understood. What they leave behind is not just a legacy of pain, but a promise of courage, of resilience, and of a future still waiting to be written. The dawn broke slow and heavy, a gray light seeping through the cracked blinds and settling over the city like a quiet warning. The streets below were waking, but inside the old house the air hung thick, still charged with the residue of nights spent chasing shadows and wrestling with ghosts. John Merritt stood by the window, watching the world tilt into day, his breath fogging the glass as he exhaled slowly, thoughts tangled in the weight of what had come before, and what was still to come. The paper key sat on the windowsill, its faded edges catching the weak light, a reminder that some doors might never fully close, and some walls could never truly be torn down. Behind him, Lily moved quietly through the room, gathering the scattered pieces of their past. Notes, photographs, whispers of a life half remembered, half forgotten. The silence between them was not empty. It was a fragile thread, taut and trembling. "We did everything we could," Lily said softly, breaking the stillness. "But now, it feels like they're building something new." John turned to her, eyes shadowed. The exposure, the truth, it opened wounds. But some things just shift beneath the surface. Outside, the city pulsed with life and noise, new voices rising, old ones clinging, the tide of change mingling with resistance. The battle was no longer just about what was hidden in basements or behind locked doors. It was about the walls people built, the barriers forged in fear, the new lines drawn in the sand. John crossed to the desk, picking up a folder marked surveillance reports, faces blurred in grainy footage, whispered conversations intercepted, signs of a new network weaving itself into the cracks left behind. "We're fighting ghosts now," he said, voice low but steady. "The old monsters died, but new ones, new walls, rise." Lily joined him, her gaze fixed on the screens flickering with images of a city under watch. "They're smarter, quieter, more dangerous." John nodded, feeling the familiar surge of resolve. "Then we build our own walls, walls made of truth, of community, of voices that refuse to be silenced." The room seemed to pulse with energy as they plotted their next move. Plans sketched out in hurried notes, alliances forged in whispered meetings, hope threading through the cracks. They weren't just survivors anymore. They were architects, builders of a new future. Outside, the city stretched wide and uncertain, a landscape of light and shadow, promise and peril. And at the heart of it, John and Lily stood firm, a new wall rising, not of stone or steel, but of courage, conviction, and the unyielding belief that even in darkness, light finds a way through.